Hi, this is Paul McGuire. We're going to continue our investigation into the truth of reality, spiritual truth, and the truth of God's Word versus the big lie of this present world system, which is under the temporary power of Lucifer, who is the father of lies. In fact, the word Satan means the father of lies. Now, because this present world system, which is often referred to as Babylon or Mystery Babylon, is a temporary Luciferian world system, that means it's temporarily under the control of Lucifer and his army of fallen angels, 1/3 of the fallen angels, and those men and women who have chosen to sell their souls to the devil. So, Jesus Christ, who is God, has temporarily allowed Lucifer to rule this earth and the people in it. Because when God originally created mankind, men and women, Adam and Eve, in the Garden of Eden, he gave them the supernatural authority to rule and reign the Garden of Eden and planet Earth. And what was the Garden of Eden? The Garden of Eden was the most incredible paradise that there's no words to describe. In fact, the Garden of Eden was heaven on earth, literally. And the heaven that you and I will inhabit as believers in Jesus Christ, who have put our faith in the saving message of Christ, or the gospel of Jesus Christ, when we join Christ in heaven with our brand new glorified bodies, heaven, the new earth, and the new Jerusalem is going to be vastly beyond anything that the Garden of Eden provided. It's going to be beyond, there's no words to describe how magnificent heaven's going to be. And if you've accepted Christ into your life as your personal Lord and Savior, you are guaranteed entrance into heaven. Think about that. And if you haven't accepted Christ into your life, well, that's something you need to seriously consider. And we've given you an opportunity to pray a simple prayer in this series where you can invite Christ into your life to be your Savior. Because after all, we all need salvation. We all die. No one escapes death. Everybody dies. And so that fact alone should motivate you to desire a Savior. Now, we live in this world temporarily ruled by Lucifer, he was the highest ranking angel among all the angels, the most intelligent, the most beautiful, the most talented. He was a phenomenal businessman, an importer, an exporter. He understood economics, profit. He understood creativity, the arts. He was the worship leader in heaven. So his talents and his abilities and giftings were simply, and still are, off the chart, totally off the chart. And Lucifer, in his fallen state, has incredible power, giftedness, and ability. And therefore, he's running this planet simply by default, because God gave Adam and Eve the authority to rule over planet Earth. In fact, it says early on in the book of Genesis that Adam and Eve were given the authority or rulership over every creeping thing. And that was just a little heads up from God in his word when he said the words, Adam and Eve have authority over every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth. That was just a subtle hint from God that the creeping thing that creeps upon the earth, he was referring to Lucifer, who indwells the serpent of old, which is the physical being of Lucifer, and the serpent of old was a slithering being that creeped on the earth, every creeping thing. So Adam and Eve rejected God's word, and think of God's word as the most important technological instrument or control panel given to any man or woman alive, because it has an off switch and an on switch to all kinds of reality. And as long as you obey the instruction manual, which is God's word, you can turn on the on switch to blessing, eternal life, the provisions of God, the peace of God, the healing of God, the defense of God. The vast resources that God has available to those of us who believe and trust in him are available to us if we will just turn on the on switch, which means we put our faith in the supernatural promises of God. But conversely, if we choose to reject God's word or have unbelief towards God's word, we turn on the off switch and a supernatural curse is released, not only into our lives individually, but into all the earth. And that's what Adam and Eve did. They were kings and queens of planet Earth, but they were seduced by the spiritual deception of Lucifer. They disobeyed the word of God. They activated the law of sin and death, and the death force entered their lives, and it entered all of creation. So all of creation that we see today, although it's spectacular and beautiful, it is in a fallen state. That's why animals devour one another. That's why human beings act so savagely and so with so much evil and wars and rapes and all the rest of that horrible stuff. It comes from man's fallen nature, which was activated by Adam and Eve when they chose to reject the word of God. So in this time period, the reason God has not come back already to judge mankind for its wickedness, because the history of mankind, if you're a secular humanist and you think that man is basically good except for his environment and that it's totally his environment that makes him evil, you are either in need of heavy-duty clinical meds or you're in heavy-duty need of psychotherapy, because you're in a reality denial syndrome big time. Where in the history of the human race could you possibly have come up with the deluded notion that man is basically good? I mean, just look at yourself in the mirror, for crying out loud. And I would say the same of myself. Just look in the mirror. Are you an angel? Are you totally holy and pure and good and loving in all your thoughts? Now, if you say yes to that, then you're delusional, which compounds your psychiatric problems. You're not good. I'm not good. We are by nature self-centered. When we have babies and children, and a mother gives birth to her child, we love our children. Our children are a delight. But look, let's not kid ourselves. Children are self-centered. It's all about them. Now, part of that is survival, but when it continues on to adolescence and adulthood, it becomes problematic. So the whole human race, the history of the human race, is one of evil, selfishness, power, war, lust, rape, and everything that comes out of the human heart. And it's evil. Not that men and women are totally evil, they're not. They're wicked in the spiritual sense and categorization. They're evil in the spiritual category. But even though they're fallen creatures, all of us are fallen creatures when we have been born after the fall, most human beings have a certain percentage of godlike qualities, attributes, and virtues. That doesn't mean we're not fallen, because we are. But we're capable of doing good, loving, kind, decent, compassionate things. So man, in practicality, is a composite between virtuous and good things, which are also in the historical record and in your own personal record. But mankind is capable of doing horribly evil things. But if you add it all up over thousands and thousands of years, you see that the history of the human race basically is one of bloodshed, horror, mass extinction, unspeakable greed, cruelty. It's a very ugly track record. So you can't say that man is intrinsically good, nor can you come up with this ridiculous idea that Marxists and humanists come up with. I hear people all the time in public office, etc., say things like, well, the only reason they're behaving so in such an evil way and they're being so violent and destructive, the only reason they're murdering people, etc., is because they were economically deprived as young people and young adults. And that economic deprivation and the fact that they're of a particular race or ethnic group was so traumatic to them that justifies their committing evil and very horrific acts, that somehow it's justified. It's not justified. You can go back 50 years ago to any neighborhood in America, whether it's white, black, Hispanic, or whatever it was or is, no matter what class it was or is, whether it was working class, middle class, unemployed class. If you went to a neighborhood that was African American 60 years ago, or a white neighborhood that was poor and destitute 60 years ago, or an Hispanic neighborhood, there weren't these violent gangs shooting people up, selling the bodies of 12-year-old girls and boys, and sex trafficking and worse, shooting up heroin, killing people, unspeakable cruelty. That didn't exist. You know why it didn't exist? Because 60 years ago or more, every American had, to one degree or another, in his mind or her mind and heart, there existed some kind of biblical worldview. In other words, they didn't have to be, committed Christians, but they had enough of the Bible inside them. They knew what the 10 Commandments were. They knew the commandments of God. They had heard about a heaven and a hell. They had heard about the fact that God is going to judge every man and woman after they die. And so there was, to one degree or another, the fear of the Lord in our society. And it was because of that respect for God and the knowledge that they were going to be accountable in the afterlife for what they did in this present physical reality, that caused people to act and behave with restraint. So there was a moral restraint at work in our society, which was a super positive benefit of having a biblical worldview permeate society. And things like common courtesy and common decency and so on and so forth were all the product of a biblical worldview. That's not to say that people who called themselves Christians or who claimed to have a biblical worldview were acted the right way all the time. No, there are endless examples of people who claim to be Christians, who claim to believe in the Bible, who acted horribly, who were complete hypocrites. I'm not ignoring that. Hypocrisy among Christian people and religious people has always been there. And we could go further than that. We can think of some of the most horrific incidents in American history. A major example would be the fact that people, white people who claimed to be Christians, either bought or stole slaves from Africa, had the slaves' bodies piled on top of one another, and then had these African American men and women work as slaves in their plantations, picking cotton and stuff like that, where they were beat. The women were sometimes raped. while their slave masters, who said they were Christians, would, go to church on Sunday morning, sing Amazing Grace, and then in the hot afternoon sun drink lemonade under their shade, while they treated often their brothers and sisters in the Lord like complete animals. And that is a horrible sin. And there's no way of whitewashing it. There's no way of saying it didn't happen. It did happen. And so the blood still cries out from the land over that horrible sin that white Christians did towards African Americans who came here against their will to be slaves. That's a reality. We're not talking about living in Willy Wonka and the chocolate factory land. We're talking about reality. We can also go back further than that to when, again, many people who called themselves Christians came, made treaties with the Indians, and they said they were Christians, and they broke the treaties. They slaughtered the Indians. They stole their land. They raped their women, and they treated the Indians horrifically. And yet these people claim to be Christians. Now, they obviously weren't real Christians, because history also tells us that many of the Pilgrims and Puritans who were real Christians in the 1600s partnered with the Indians. They broke bread together. They had Thanksgiving together. The father of the first great spiritual awakening, Jonathan Edwards, decided to moved his home to an Indian reservation to live and minister among the Indians, and they loved one another. But then others came later who were Christian in name only. So I'm not trying to give a make-believe magic carpet ride account of history. There has been evils done in the name of Christianity. However, looking at the larger picture, whenever a people or a population endeavor to live out true biblical Christianity, which begins with this vital factor: they have repented of their sins to God, they've invited Christ into their life and invited Christ to make them born again, and they truly have the Holy Spirit or Jesus Christ living inside them. When anyone enters into that kind of supernatural relationship with God, and then not just says it, but walks in that path with God, the fruit of a true Christian's life is love, it's justice, it's peace, it's kindness, and you can observe it. So wherever you see that true Christian relationship, you see healing and prosperity and blessing being poured out upon a nation or a community. The problem has always been the Christian religion versus the reality of Christians who really do have a real relationship with Jesus Christ. Because the unbelieving world can't really tell the difference. To them, it's one and the same. They both say they're Christians. Well, a discerning Christian understands that just because you call yourself a Christian doesn't mean you're a Christian any more than if you stand in a garage, as the old saying goes, and call yourself a car, you're a car. In order for you to be a true Christian, you have to walk with Christ and you have to be born again. So that's an important distinction. So what is happening in our nation today is part of a long continuum from the very beginning of the world, from the time of Adam and Eve and onwards. And there were many notable events which happened in human history. But what seems to have happened on a cyclical basis quite often, and the Bible brings this out, is that Satan empowers men and women who choose to do his bidding. And he doesn't do that for all of the people who do his bidding, but there are select groups of people who, along generational lines or family lines, they choose to worship Lucifer, and they indulge in satanic sacrifices and rituals and so on and so forth. You read an account of that when Joshua and Caleb were commanded by God to go into the land of Canaan. Well, who were the Canaanites? The Canaanites were primarily a hybrid race of men and women who were the descendants of fallen angels who had sexual relationships with human women, and they were soulless beings. And these descendants were called the Rephaim and the Nephilim. And they were the giants of old, and they populated Canaan. And they were an evil race, and the reason we know that is their primary form of worship was worshiping Satan in the form of different pagan statues or idols. For example, they worshiped Baal. And to worship Baal, the backslidden Jews and the people of Canaan would burn their children alive on the altar of Baal, which was a symbol of like a bull, and the hands were metal, heated white hot, and they would burn their children alive in a satanic sacrifice to Baal. Or they worshipped the female form of Satan, whose name was Ashtaroth, and they would commit all kinds of sexual immorality, drugs and stuff, worshiping Ashtaroth. And these were the beginning of the Luciferian and satanic religions, and from there spread the religion of Mystery Babylon, which is the template. It's the satanic template for the Luciferian control of planet Earth, which we'll get into in just a little bit. I'm Paul McGuire. Visit paulmcguire.us, and we're going to continue discovering the beginning of evil and the beginning of good. Hi, this is Paul McGuire. Pursuing the truth. And pursuing the truth always involves piercing through virtual reality or artificial reality, or what is called the matrix. You've got to pierce through those veils of illusion to see real reality, or what Dr. Francis Schaeffer called final reality or true truth. Now, when we go back to ancient civilizations, there were, in the biblical account of history, as well as archaeological sources, many super civilizations in the ancient world. One that comes to mind that is figured prominently in the Bible is the existence and origins of ancient Babylon at the time of the Tower of Babel, or Babel. Now, ancient Babylon was the world's first global society. It was the world's first one-world government. Yet in their hearts, they were not worshiping the God of the Bible. They were worshiping Lucifer. Their leader was Nimrod. Now, Nimrod had some unusual DNA in that many people suspected, based on his genetic lineage, which is clearly outlined in the Old Testament, that Nimrod was not just an ordinary man, that Nimrod was part of a hybrid race that consisted of fallen angel DNA and human DNA. And therefore he was soulless, but he was a giant, and he had enormous intelligence, a huge degree of giftedness, and through his consciousness and giftedness, he had access to supernatural technology and science at an extremely high level, a level that was so high that it wasn't considered normal for that time period. And the materialization of this kind of futuristic science and technology actually began on Mount Hermon, when the fallen angels descended upon Mount Hermon, and in addition to mating with human women and producing the offspring of the Nephilim and the Rephaim, the fallen angels gave mankind highly advanced technology, science, highly advanced mathematics, medicine, and an entire spectrum of advanced technologies and sciences, which enabled people like Nimrod to architecturally build the Tower of Babel, which had multiple functions. And here are just a few of the functions that the Tower of Babel had. Number one is it was a worship tower that allowed the people of Babylon to climb up the steps, elevate themselves into the heavens, conduct forms of astrological worship. And the reason they wanted to go into the heavens is they believed that God lived in the heavens, and that the higher they went into the heavens, the more like God they would be. So in a sense, their worship style was doing what Lucifer did. Lucifer wanted to rise up to the throne of God and to become God. Well, this spirit was in the people of ancient Babylon. They wanted to ascend into the heavens and be like gods, which was Satan's sin and temptation to Adam and Eve. But the Tower of Babel was also an energy vortex. The precise architectural form of the Tower of Babel was a pyramidical or a pyramid-shaped tower, a giant pyramid-shaped tower with a pyramid structure to it. It was an energy vortex, which means that it had the ability to receive and transmit enormous amounts of energy from one pyramid to another. That these pyramids have been discovered like in Russia, at the bottom of the Bahamas, and all over planet Earth in different locations. So it was part of that grid, so to speak. But finally, the Tower of Babel was constructed to be an interdimensional portal which allowed for the entrance of interdimensional beings or fallen angels into the physical world. Now you say, how can you make such an outrageous claim? I can make the outrageous claim based on the fact that the literal translation of the Hebrew word Babel or Babylon or Babel means gate of the gods. Now, what gods were they talking about? They weren't talking about the creator God, because he's only one God. They were using God with a small g in reference to the demonic entities or fallen angels, which would come from the invisible realm or spiritual realm into the earth after ritualistic magic was performed in combination with highly advanced science and technology. So it became a gateway or a portal for the gods, which were these fallen angels. Now, CERN, which is a technology in our time period, one of the hidden purposes of CERN is to accelerate subatomic energy at such a high rate that it cracks open a door or a portal once again into a higher dimension, allowing for the entrance of interdimensional entities, or what Christians would call fallen angels. So this was these were the multiple purposes of the Tower of Babel or Babylon. And it's important to understand that. Also, Babylon was where the concept of science, magic, technology, sorcery being integrated as one holistic system. They didn't view science and technology, sorcery and magic as separated systems. The ancients viewed science, technology, mathematics, sorcery, all of these things as one continuum or body of knowledge. That's why Arthur C. Clarke coined the term science is magic. Now, what they did in ancient Babylon was establish the world's first Babylonian economic system, which was based on what's called fractional reserve banking, where you cause the people to borrow from you, because the Bible says the lender becomes, the borrower becomes the slave to the lender. That's basic economic systems. The Rothschilds and Rockefellers used it today. The global banking system uses the idea of enslaving people by lending them money, or enslaving governments by lending them money. And the other thing that they created in ancient Babylon, and this is a form of magic, because modern economics is nothing more than ancient magic produced electronically, managed via computers. But it's based on an elemental principle of what's called alchemical magic. And alchemical magic goes back to the time and the legends of what was called the Philosopher's Stone. And the Philosopher's Stone was supposedly this stone, this rock or whatever, that the ancient alchemists, who were a combination of chemists and magicians, they claimed they could produce silver or gold out of an ordinary stone, thus something of value from nothing, and that's called alchemical magic. Now, in ancient Babylon, what they would do, which is the same thing modern banking does, is they would loan whatever money they chose to a lender. And like modern banks, they didn't have anything on deposit to back it up. So theoretically, if they loaned $100,000 in ancient Babylon, it would simply be a note written on papyrus, or an early form of paper, or it would be $100,000 in coins, but the metallic value of the coins, they were low-grade metals. Okay, so the expectation was that secretly somewhere in a vault they would have gold or precious jewels to back up the $100,000 they were loaning to people, or at least some of it. That's why it's called fractional reserve banking. In reality, it was a scheme, a mind game. In reality, it was an illusion. Now remember, science and magic and sorcery, especially sorcery and magic, rely on illusions, rely on hypnosis, convincing people that something which is not real is real, is a form of hypnosis, which is a form of sorcery, which is a form of magic. So they would loan people different amounts, like $100,000, and they had nothing hidden in a vault to back it up. They didn't have $100,000 tucked away to back up the $100,000 they loaned. They didn't have any silver or gold. It was an illusion. But they acted out the illusion, magic, like it was a theatrical production. It was very ceremonial. People had robes, expensive tents and buildings. And people thought, well, we're actually going to people who are very, very rich, and they have their riches hidden so it won't be stolen. But the reality is these people have nothing. It's hocus pocus. It's magic. The whole system is illusory. And in order for this magical system to operate, as it did then in ancient Babylon, as it does today in the modern world of banking, you must have the faith, a religious faith, a magical belief in, which is suspended from logic and reason. You must have, the borrower must have a kind of religious faith, a religious belief, or a faith that the money that they're borrowing for interest has to have, they're getting a token of the value, like metals that aren't worth that much, or papyrus, a piece of paper. But they have faith in the monetary system because they believe that the people lending them the money secretly have gold and silver treasures to back it up. So the whole thing is based on faith that the lender really has something of tangible value, and that's how the monetary system works. Now, this was copied in ancient Egypt. It was copied in every empire throughout human civilization. And notice that in ancient Egypt, they too used a ziggurat or a pyramidical structure. And the part of the way this magical sorcery, science, and technology works is on top of convincing people that you can loan them money because you're fabulously rich, which is an illusion. You convince the masses that you and your family are gods, god kings. Like Pharaoh convinced the people of Egypt that he and his family were god kings. Therefore, the people will not question you. They will joyously be your slaves forever. They will serve you as slaves, never complaining, because as they serve you as slaves, they truly believe they're serving God and pleasing God. So they have total dictatorial control over the masses based on science, occult science, which is magic, sorcery, and illusion. And this is why the Hebrew slaves served Pharaoh for so long, and while the people of Egypt served Pharaoh for so long. But once again, we see the symbol of their occult power is this pyramid tower, the Great Pyramids of Egypt. Now, look at the back of a US dollar. What do you see? You see the pyramid. And that's on the symbol of our money. And then it says Federal Reserve Note. And it says New World Order below the pyramid. And you see the all-seeing eye of Lucifer towards the top of the pyramid. What message is being communicated to you through the imagery on the back of the US dollar? If you look carefully, it's an occultic message that comes from Babylon, and it comes from Egypt. It's telling you that the Federal Reserve, that it says right on top, Federal Reserve Note. That means that the Federal Reserve, who you're not allowed to know anything about, they're like the god kings in Egypt and Babylon, the international bankers, are lending you money in the form of a worthless piece of paper called a US dollar bill or a $100 bill or a $500 bill or whatever. It's worthless. That piece of paper that they're giving you is worthless. You are borrowing money from them and paying them interest based on your religious belief or your faith or your belief in this magical idea that somehow the Federal Reserve, for every dollar they lend you, that they have gold or silver or precious jewels or something tangible set aside to back up the worth of what they're lending you. In the meantime, you're so thrilled to get money to be their slave that you're paying them interest. Now, if the people really knew that they were borrowing money from independent bankers who in reality constitutionally don't even have the right to control our money, if the people knew that they were borrowing money based on nothing, that the bankers don't have anything behind that paper dollar bill or the $500 bill or stacks of paper dollar bills, that the bankers don't have anything inside the bank to back it up. Okay? Now, they can have a small percentage to back it up, and that's why it's called fractional reserve banking. But they have an infinitesimal amount to back it up. So what you're really doing is you're participating in a magical, occultic system of illusion based on sorcery and magic, mixed with technology. And this is the way the entire world system under Lucifer runs and operates. The massive wealth of Rockefeller, the Rothschilds, and many of these families are Luciferian in their beliefs. They're members of the Illuminati and secret societies. But they have amassed their wealth using sorcery and magic right in front of your face. And yet, when you tell this to the average Christian, you get that glazed over look like a deer just frozen in the headlights. If you ever tried to talk to a born-again Christian who says that they read the Word of God and they believe the truth, and you try to explain the truth of the economic system to them, and they just look at you like they're in a hypnotic trance. They're just like they're ready to go to sleep at any minute, because they can't see through the illusion, the sorcery, the magic. It's like, again, the emperor has no clothes. They can't see the obvious, which is the money they're borrowing from the banks and the international bankers is based on nothing. They're printing, listen to me carefully, they're printing money from nothing, loaning it to you and governments at interest. And why did they get away with it? Because they have the power to get away with it. And that's the great secret. One of the great secrets of the reality that we really live in a cultic, magical system. And they're not lying to you. They're telling you. It's like the movie Eyes Wide Shut by Kubrick. They're telling you in the open that they're occultic, that their whole thing is based on sorcery. They're not hiding it from you. They're not. They're doing it out in the open. But you're asleep. And as long as you continue to be asleep, you can be taken advantage of. Ultimately, what all of this means is that common man and common woman and nations of this earth are being ruled by agents of Lucifer who are using science, technology, magic, and sorcery to control the masses, to enslave them. And when I say science and technology, we're now in the age where scientific mind control, which consists of all kinds of things, the usage of technology especially, amplifies the hypnotic state or the sorcery state or the state of magic. So this is just one indication of what reality is really all about. And if you're going to be free, and Jesus Christ came to set you free, that not only means free in terms of being saved, but God wants to set you free, and you're supposed to apply the truth of the Word of God to every sector or dimension of life, which includes economics. God wants to set you free economically. And you can't be free economically if you're a slave, knowingly or unknowingly, to an occultic system. That's why Jesus told you very directly, he said, you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. If you don't know the truth, you're going to be a slave. And we're told that knowledge is power, and that Jesus came to set the captives or the slaves free. You can stop being a slave the minute you choose to walk into the truth. I'm Paul McGuire. Visit paulmcguire.us.